Have you noticed how every time Gant introduces somebody with a non-traditional surname, he always just like ends at the first name? But he starts with this intonation, this kind of inflection. It's almost like he's going to say the last name, but then he just doesn't have the balls to kind of, like continue. Wow, final speaker of a conference. This is it's an honor. I personally think it's because I keep calling Jamin Hamon, and he's punishing me for it. Anyway, so I thought really hard. It's like, 2 days of great content. What hasn't been said? What can I tell you that is, something that I'm in a good position to speak of, but also that is generally interesting and useful to you? And hopefully should be something that leaves you inspired and excited and, willing to, fork that, few $100 to come back next year, right? So I thought it was really hard, and then I got it. I really just want to talk to you about, Western arts, specifically, Renaissance and like onwards, because that's what I studied at school. So let's go with that. This is a drawing by Leonardo da Vinci from the 1500s. It's an anatomically correct study of a fetus in a womb. What I find fascinating about this drawing is that at that time, like, there weren't really like medical textbooks. Like, he basically needed to, as sad as it is, he needed to look at like real human cadavers in order to figure out how to draw this. Around the same time, Michelangelo painted, this creation of Adam, which everybody knows is in the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, and this is like has similar kind of like composition. Like instead of having that baby in a womb, you have the heavens and earth, heavens and God presented in this kind of image of the human brain. What I find interesting about this, though, is that Michelangelo uses this technique called secco-fresco, which basically had him mixing egg yolks with pigments and trying to get that to stick to a ceiling. I'm not kidding. This goes on. It's like half an hour. So, Jani by Rembrandt is one of my favorite pieces of works of art. What I particularly like about Rembrandt's work is the kind of the light that it captures. It's this like extreme sort of realism within it, and it's a very distinctive quality about his work and something that he worked for really hard for his entire life to achieve. This one is The Bathers by Cézanne. This is moving a couple of hundred years forward. It's like post-impressionism. But what you can tell there is that like the level of realism has really gone down, but there is something psychologically a lot more evocative about this piece. And then moving forward a little bit, this is a picture of Morgan Freeman. It was painted by some guy called Kyle, and he did it, with a finger on an iPad. And this is called photorealistic digital painting. Anyway, at this point, some of you, the uneducated of you, might be wondering, what am I talking about? Let me explain. My name is Jani Eväkallio, and that's how you say it, Gant. I work at Formidable Labs. You've already heard about our company from Jen Luker, who spoke yesterday, and from Kyle, who hosted the panel today, so I'm not going to go into that. But it's been really great this year coming back to this conference and seeing so many people coming from the mobile development background. Because I personally, I come from web development background, and it's really great to see that this technology is going mainstream. It's becoming something that is not only for web developers, it's for anybody wanting to build a mobile app. What attracted me, though, to React Native is this idea of learn once, write everywhere, which we all know. But the more I work with mobile applications, I'm becoming to doubt whether or not this is actually an accurate representation. Like Jen said today in the panel, it's basically a lie, right? So the reason I showed you those pieces of art is that I'm going to be using them as a metaphor for some of the things that we do. And to begin with, I believe that the idea of learn once and write everywhere is roughly analogous to the idea of taking one of these painters and have them reproduce the work of art in another style, right? Like obviously, in the same way as if you know how to program in one language, it's easier for you to learn to program in another. One of these painters could have like learned the tools and techniques of another, but it wouldn't have been automatic or easy. If you give Rembrandt an iPad and tell him to make a picture of Morgan Freeman, he doesn't even know how to use the device, right? So start with the studies of a fetus in a womb. To me, like this is very much like what web development really is. It's the study of form, a study of structure, to create like a lifelike experience. It's like sometimes to me, like web development, it feels like you're basically like digging into a cadaver and like trying to figure out like how how to make it work, right? It's an act of invention. It's an act of like research and study. There's no universal guidelines. There's no standard implementations of anything. It's all up to you. Mobile development, I think, is a lot more like this picture of Morgan Freeman. There's this certain kind of attention to detail that the user expects. The platforms have historically been able to produce better performance, and users have grown to expect it. And they also expect that when they switch between apps on your phone, that these things kind of behave in a consistent manner because there are these guidelines for it. And it's kind of like the uncanny valley. Like if you're doing things not just right, it immediately clear that a picture of Morgan Freeman might not look quite right. And so creation of Atom, to me, this is just a representation of these platform design guidelines. It's the great tool makers from the sky, the gods at Apple and Google, giving us these tools and giving us these guidelines, right? Oh, I wasn't expecting a laugh on that. Thanks. And then Jani then. These design principles that I'm talking about, they're kind of like laws of physics. Like what if Rembrandt, while painting this picture, instead of like diligently studying, like physical reality and trying to create this effect of light, it just went like, fuck it, I'm just gonna put a lens flare here. Do you think that this piece would be a masterpiece? I don't think so. And I think this is exactly where this idea of learn once, write everywhere kind of gets you. Like yes, you know React and you're learning React Native, so like some of the things. But we as developers, we're so hungry for easy solutions and to broaden our reach and be able to increase our value to our employers and all that kind of stuff. So we want to buy into these fictions. It's not React Native's fault really. It's not bad marketing, I don't think. It just it's so convenient to us that we want to believe in it. So everybody seen this? How do you do it? Like how do you get from the point that like you're a React web developer and you get to the get to be a React Native mobile developer? There's a lot of details. I could go into them. Instead, I'm just going to refer to you to a talk that Alex Kotliarski gave it last year, right here on this stage. It's called Building Stellar User Experiences with React Native, and it just does like a phenomenal job of describing what great mobile interfaces are made of and how to build them in React Native and all that kind of stuff. Instead, I want to talk about something that he left out. I think it's the biggest unsolved problem. It's not, the biggest unsolved problem isn't Fabric or synchronous rendering or anything like that kind of stuff. I think the biggest React Native development challenge right now is capitalism. And I think it's like one of the biggest challenges that we have in the world right now. I mean, you as American audience might disagree with me, but there we go. So in this perfect, oh yeah, come on, pity socialism. So in this perfect world, we could basically, spend our lifetimes getting the light just right. We could study books, we could study the works of masters, we could learn about it, but in practice, we're building software in the system where we have a lot of constraints of production, right? We need to stick to timelines, we need to stick to budget, and this is setting constraints for the kind of work that we can do. And this is, of course, true of all software, but I'm starting to think that the React Native community itself is particularly badly affected by this. And the reason for that is that at Formidable, when we talk to a lot of different companies, whether they're big or small, they come to React Native with this idea that they think that they're going to get, which is, I wonder if this is something that that can help us to make software quicker and cheaper. And that's not a bad goal as such, but like when that is your motivation for adopting a technology at an even like organizational level, then that kind of bleeds into your general working practices and your decision-making abilities. It's almost like a self-selection kind of thing. So the question is, can you make it cheaper? Everybody here knows that if you want to make like a Swift app and a Kotlin app, that's going to be more code, and therefore React Native is probably going to be better or like faster. But I don't know. So the motivation of efficiency also has like a lot of like really sort of like unintentionally harmful consequences. Because when tooling promises efficiency, the goal becomes efficiency. you forget the one question that I think you should ask. It's not cheaper, it's, you want better. So better than what? Better than native mobile apps? Well, I don't know, let's see. So using, these great tools that we have to create, like more maintainable, more reasonable software, like we can make it less buggy. That's great. So yeah, in those regards, I think React Native is like a great technology. But can we actually make a better user experience in React Native? I don't think so. Like if this is the goal that you set for yourself, if you want to create a native user experience, given enough time and enough resources, a team working in Swift and Kotlin can always create a better app if this is the beauty standard or the standard that you set for yourself. Because there's always going to be cost. There's the startup time cost, render perf costs. You're using JavaScript recreations of native UI components. So this is the reality. Like it's basically like if Morgan Freeman was standing here with me right now, like there's no way that you can paint a picture of Morgan Freeman that is more Morgan Freeman than Morgan Freeman. Like that is just not an achievable goal. So what's the goal? Can we create applications that are good enough? Can we find like acceptable compromise while still delivering apps that are good enough? So in the past, like many tools and technologies have tried this. Like I've tried them all, like Xamarin, Forms, Cordova, like Trevor today referred to as a trash fire, I believe. And I agree. Like with anything else that I've tried before, it's either impossible or pointlessly hard to create good enough UX with these tools. But having built half a dozen apps now and leading a team that has built dozens of React Native apps, I can definitely see that you can create apps that are good enough. But it doesn't come for free, and this is kind of what I really want to talk about. These tools, they can help us fall into a bit of success, but it depends on you to make it so. And if we want React Native as a technology to succeed, not to be remembered as the trash fire of 2018, we need to make sure that we create apps that are great. Otherwise, it'll be dismissed just like PhoneGap or whatever. I think the best example of this mentality to me is Adam Miscavige, or Skevi, who worked at Expo and then at Airbnb. So he was working on React navigation, and he noticed that there's this transition animation that doesn't look quite right. It doesn't look quite like iOS does. And let me just like read you this paragraph, because I think this is like one of the best PRs I've ever seen in my life. After doing some research, I ended up disassembling the Quartz core framework, reading the assembly, and determined that Apple's implementation of CA Spring Animation does not use an integrated numerical animation model as we do in Animated Spring, but instead solve for the closed form of the equations that govern damped harmonic oscillation. Oh no, I spoiled that one. And then he went and he re-implemented that in Animated so that it could end up in React Navigation. So I don't think that that falls in the category of learn once, right everywhere. Like if you are reading that in documentation and you want to try this technology and you want to have high UX standards, I don't think that can be described as like, you've decided that you want to build your app in React Native and you're kind of like going to your boss, hat in hand, going like, yeah, sorry, boss, I told you that this navigation story would be like 1 point, so like 2 days. But I've been reading this assembly for like a week and I've like no idea what's going on. So sorry. I broke my slides. Anyway, so the thing is that the obvious difference between like some organizations and others is so a lot of 90s kids in here today. The difference is that the amount that you are able to invest in things like user experience, like tooling. It's highly probable that you have to work in an environment that has different constraints from others, and it's like not like Facebook doesn't have constraints either, but like it's a different amount of zeros at the end of it. But this is not an excuse to give up, and this is where we rejoin my announced title, "Good Enough Still Isn't Good Enough." And I say still because I've given a similar presentation before at React Native EU last year. Some of you might have seen this. And up until this point, this presentation has been very similar. But back then, I spent the second half of this focusing on how to build collaborative engineering culture, where basically management and design and development kind of works together to, like in a very grown-up sense. But, like being the final speaker today, I felt that was a bit sort of like boring and sleep-inducing. So that's not the story I want to tell today, but there is another story. And this is a story that is motivated by something that's happened to me, like in my personal life as a general citizen of the world in the last year. And it's like, I know probably many of you know this, but the world doesn't really seem like the same place as it was last year. Like everything has kind of like gone a bit fucked up. And it started with politics, but it's affected my general outlook in life. I just can't believe in centrism anymore. Like I can't, it's not a viable strategy in life. I can't be here, like talking to you about like how to like compromise and how to, like sort of do this. Because here's the thing, if the other side is pulling really hard to their direction, then you need to pull back in equal or greater force in order to counterbalance that, right? Compromises are outcomes, they're not goals. It's your job, it's not your job to do their compromising, for them, right? Like they pull, you pull, and compromise is what happens when two, forces find an equilibrium. So you could say that I've become somewhat radicalized in my like general sort of thinking. And to bring this back into software development, I think our job as software developers is to build great software. As React Native developers, our job is to build great user interfaces. That feels like a statement that should go without saying, but I don't think it is. At these technical conferences, we focus so much on code organization and techniques and frameworks and state management and all that kind of stuff. And those are great, and they're going to help us get to our goals. But we shouldn't forget that the end goal of React, the tagline of React, is that it's a library for building user interfaces, and our job is to build those user interfaces. So I call this segment writing React Native apps like an artist, mainly because I really needed to have an excuse to get you to watch me talk 5 minutes about like those pieces of art. But I really think that looking at like talking about some of these things and you thinking about them, I can guarantee you that there's not going to be a single thing that you can take to work on Monday and go like, now I know how to do that. But I hope that there will be some things that you will take away from this in a way that has, like maybe will affect your general way that you approach building software and building user interfaces. So let's go. I think the first thing is that it's really easy to confuse the tools and techniques that artists use and that we use between what we call the art itself or the product itself. When we go to conferences, we speak about developer experiences, but it's kind of like useful thing to remember that nobody cares about the developer experience except developers themselves, right? Like we are already the most overpaid, cushy sort of like class in the society, and then we go in conferences and we talk about how we want to have a great experience, right? like there's some rich irony in there. Thank you. But our overlords will allow this because they know that it's just coded speech for productivity. It's just basically us saying that we want better developer experiences that they think, oh yeah, because that's going to basically turn these very expensive human resources into better production units. But the subversive power move here is that we take that developer experience and we take that added productivity and we turn it into better product experiences, better user experiences, not into quicker turnarounds or some other goals. All of those things kind of go hand to hand and compromises will be made, but this is not our goal. Our goal is the product. Secondly, art, in order to be in any way meaningful, needs to be immediate, and it needs to be free of irony, and needs to be free of detachment. You have to start from a point of truly, deeply caring. In order to fight for these user experiences, fight these battles, you need to care. It's not like global war. I mean, you can't just pretend to care. It's it's a real thing. Sorry. Sorry. So what this means in practice is putting the user experience in forefront. Like fighting, sweating those little details. Just generally taking an approach into any interaction, any product decision, is that this is, this is our goal. No matter how much you care, though, in order to be effective, you need to have a baseline of knowledge and understanding that what constitutes user experience. So this is the thing that happens between the first step of drawing the owl and the second step of drawing the owl. And I think a great place for this, generally, to understand the laws that govern the user experience that we seek are the Google Material Design Guidelines and the Apple Human Interface Guidelines. How many people here have actually read those things? All right, that's a good number. Not everybody. The rest of you all have some study to do. And beyond these guidelines, everything that we know about user experience, everything we know about how humans interact with computers or with phones is a result of experimentation and research. And a lot of this research is actually published on the internet in journals and blogs for completely free. So, and this is general knowledge. This is generally useful knowledge that, will translate to any software. So this is mandatory reading, people. Next thing is understanding your particular medium. If you're building for iOS and Android, you need to have an intuitive understanding of how those platforms actually work. And there's an easy solution for that. There's a really, really simple solution for that. And it costs, about $1,000, and you're not going to like it. But it's whichever mobile platform you're using today, start using the other one. Like, I know that there's a lot of, sort of tribalism around iOS versus Android users. But if you don't live the experience of having, actually used the platforms that you're building for, you don't know what's right. You don't know what Morgan Freeman looks like, so to speak. So yeah, sorry about that, but you'll have to go and buy a phone. The next thing is to study the work of other masters. This is very simple. The best way that, no matter what your budget is in terms of what your design team looks like, what your role in the organization is, the best way to get great ideas is to steal them. It's that simple. And it's not about copying instead of being creative. It's about copying things that work because they work. If you take the pull to refresh, right? That was not a part of any platform guideline. That was something that Tweety made, before they got bought at Twitter. And now today, if the user basically has a list view and they drag it down, and if it doesn't refresh the list, they will be frustrated because that's the thing that they expect. And in order for you to know that, you need to know how apps work. Next, I think, I want to talk a bit about, sort of creativity and aesthetic. I said earlier that React Native cannot fully replicate native experience. I fundamentally believe this to be true, and you can disagree, and feel free to @ me on Twitter. But it's also an incomplete truth. There is this view layer that we have in React Native that's actually, instead of limiting, it's freeing and it's enabling. As long as we conform to those platform usability standards, accessibility standards, like Jen talked about, we have the ability to be a lot more creative because we essentially have a custom drawing framework in our use that we can do basically a lot of things that we want. And if you can't do that, there's this GL. So, go wild, right? So I think instead of trying to painstakingly replicate that Morgan Freeman, I think it's about finding, finding the kind of expression that you're looking for. I don't know. Have courage to stand out is what I'm saying. And one point that I haven't made yet, which is probably something that is implicitly goes through everything that I've said today, but is not universally agreed, is that I believe that software development and user experience design are not two separate fields. Some of us are able to code, so that's great. Some of us are able to create beautiful visual art, like the design team that made this amazing branding for this conference. Some people are able to do both. But no matter what your job title is, we all share the objective of being able to create experiences that are useful, that are usable, and that are delightful. So whatever your strengths are, I think you need to kind of take that and apply that with creativity. If you have eye for the visual, even if you're not on the design team and you have somebody pushing sketches or Photoshops or Zeppelins at you, there is a kind of area in which that those designs are not going to be complete. Those empty states are not going to be designed, and loading states are not going to be designed, and things are really hard to do, and all those things. And this is what happens when we segregate and separate the unified field of creating user experiences. So work in that. And if you are one of those user interface developers that is just like really like, calls themselves poor at design, well, firstly, I would question your life choices, and you're probably just a full stack developer. But also, like there's a lot of really hard mathy things in creating user experience. If you think of animations, it's like very, very complicated work, and it's delightful work for somebody who enjoys doing that because it's localized, it's risk-free. You can't basically like break your entire app or cause massive technical debts, but you can hack on that, beautiful animation. And then when the boss asks you like how long this feature will take, you'll just tell them like 3 times of what you think, and then you'll have time to make the animation. So there is one classical quality of an artist that we don't want to replicate. I'll just get that out of the way. Is that, I talk here with fighting words. I'm here, like basically trying to radicalize a bunch of people. Like I think, there might be, some kind of government agency outside right now with helicopters coming to take me away. But this is the thing, like don't be an asshole. Like creative geniuses have, historically speaking, been given a lot of leeway. But that's not what I'm advocating, and that's definitely not, 2018. In order to fight for this and advocate for this, you shouldn't be collaborative. Like there's definitely a sweet spot between happy-go-lucky and happy-go-fuck-yourself or whatever. Like it's, like you can actually do these things in a kind of like creative, collaborative manner, and also respect everybody no matter like what their skill set or what their, particular field of expertise is. That said, the key message that I'll spend the rest of the time talking about is the don't stop at the good enough. So do you remember this painting by the Bathers, by Cézanne? I saw this ad in the London National Gallery, and it immediately caught my eye. I mean, it's very large also, but that probably helped. But like there was something about it that I couldn't quite take my eyes off of. And I was thinking, what makes this thing a masterpiece? There's this odd atmosphere here. At the same time, it's very strange. It's very beautiful. In its composition, there's this kind of tension and density and symmetry that is intentionally broken. But the thing about Cézanne's Bathers is that it took a remarkable process of perfecting over time, of not being satisfied in the good enough. Because before he painted this, he painted, a few other bathers, and he painted more of them, and he painted more of them, and he painted more of them. This is a kind of process of iteration that, you would say that gets any individual to the point of mastery and being able to, create great things. We know that we need to ship things. That's where the compromise comes in. In an ideal world, we would never ship anything because there's no users, and there's no bug reports, and there's no PagerDuty, and like it's great. But we need to ship things. But we still shouldn't settle for the good enough. React Native as a technology is perfect for this. All the things that we've explored at this conference, Kent's component patterns, Samantha's talk about component libraries, the fact that we're writing a single code base instead of multiple ones, it makes this platform perfect for change and evolution over time. So, with these tools that support incremental improvements, I think we can actually create better products in React Native over time. That it won't be seen as just the good enough solution to create, random, average line of business apps, because, like everybody is competing in the same capitalist sort of field of enterprise. And you and I and all of us, like using these technologies, we have the advantage of actually not just like making a thing. We have an advantage of keeping and iterating on it. So I think there is an opportunity for us to make React Native the best technology, but we're all responsible for making that happen. I think React Native, in the next couple of years, it will need its billion-dollar app. And of course, some of that stuff comes from the evil business owner who is putting like schedules and budgets on you. But like some of it will have to come also from the user experience. Because if you look at the billion-dollar businesses that are in the mobile consumer space, they all share one thing, which is that they're generally amazing products. So I'm going to leave you with this. It's a thing that I found on the internet that Michelangelo supposedly said. I don't think he said anything like this ever, because he lived like 500 years ago, and this seems like a very random thing to attribute to the person. But this really conveniently closes the narrative for me, so I'm just going to go there anyway. Which is that the greatest danger for most of us is not that we aim too high and we miss it, but it's that we aim too low and we reach it. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is resist the efficiency narrative. Efficiency is good. It allows us to do more with less, makes the company more competitive. But focusing on efficiency instead of on products, it fundamentally is just going to lead into inferior products and this technology becoming the next trash fire that we talk about. So this is it. This is really all I want to say is like just don't be satisfied with the good enough. And that's why we're all here today. Like all of us are here today because we want to be great at our jobs, and our job is to build great products with React Native. Thank you.